The lie was as shimmering and beautiful as the 30-carat diamond on her finger. From across the opulent dining room, I watched her trace the rim of her champagne flute, her eyes sparkling with practiced adoration for the man beside her. That man was Corbin Langley, a name whispered with the kind of reverence reserved for modern-day kings. But I knew the truth. I saw it plain as day on the glowing screen of her unlocked phone. And in that moment, I faced a choice that would detonate my entire life, stay silent, and keep my job, or tell a billionaire he was being played for a fool and risk everything. I chose. And the next morning, my world didn't just change. It was handed to me on a piece of matte black titanium. The air in Aurelia, a 3-Michelin-star sanctuary on the 60th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, was different. It was thinner, cleaner, and smelled faintly of money and white truffle. For Maya Rossi, a 23-year-old art history student at NYU. It was the rarefied atmosphere of a planet she was only allowed to visit on a work visa. Her real world, a cramped 4th-floor walk-up in the East Village with a mountain of her late mother's medical debt, smelled of burnt coffee and anxiety. Every shift was an 8-hour exercise in invisibility. She was to be a ghost in a crisp black uniform, a silent, efficient phantom who refilled water glasses, cleared plates, and anticipated needs without ever being truly seen. Maya was good at it. Her observational skills, honed by years of studying the minute details in Renaissance paintings, made her an exemplary waitress. She could spot the subtle shift in a diner's posture that signaled he was ready for the check. The almost imperceptible frown that meant the sommelier had missed the mark. Tonight she was assigned to Section C, the row of secluded tables with the best views of the glittering urban sprawl. And at the prized corner table, Table 7, sat Corbin Langley. Even if you didn't know his name, you knew he was someone. He wasn't loud or flashy like the tech bros who occasionally swaggered in. Langley possessed a quiet, gravitational pull. In his mid-50s, with hair the color of distinguished silver and eyes that held a certain weary intelligence, he wore a bespoke navy suit with the casual grace of a man born into it. He was old money, the kind that owned the buildings, not just rented the penthouses. Corbin Langley was the head of Langley Global, a private equity firm, with a portfolio as vast and varied as his fabled art collection. And on his arm was Arabella de Courcy. Arabella was, in a word, breathtaking. She was a decade or two younger than him, with hair the color of dark honey cascading over a slinky, emerald-green dress that probably cost more than Maya's entire semester of tuition. Her laughter was a musical tinkling sound that filled the small pockets of silence around their table. She would touch his arm lightly, lean in to whisper something in his ear. Her movements a perfectly choreographed ballet of affection. Maya had served them twice before. The first time she'd been awed. They seemed like the perfect couple, a modern-day fairy tale. The second time, she noticed the cracks. She saw how Arabella's smile didn't quite reach her eyes when Corbin was looking at his menu, how her gaze would flick around the room, assessing, calculating. Tonight was the third time, and the performance was beginning to unravel. The evening started as usual. Maya presented the menus, her voice a soft professional murmur. "Good evening, Mr. Langley, Ms. de Courcy. May I get you started with an aperitif this evening?" "The usual for me, Maya," Corbin said, giving her a small, tired smile. He remembered her name. That was rare. It was also why this was so much harder. He was a person, not just a headline. "Of course, sir, a Macallan 25 neat." "And for you, my dear?" he asked, turning to Arabella, his entire being softening. "A Kir Royale, darling." "Let's celebrate," she purred, her crimson-nailed hand resting possessively on his. "Celebrate what?" he asked, his eyes crinkling with genuine affection. "Just us," she said, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper. Maya retreated to the bar, the knot in her stomach tightening. It was the same feeling she'd gotten as a teenager, watching her own father fall for the saccharine flatteries of the woman who would eventually break their family apart. Her mother, a practical, no-nonsense woman, had been too real, too tired from working 2 jobs to compete with the fantasy. Maya saw the same tragic pattern playing out in front of her, only on a scale that involved billions of dollars and a woman who was a master of her craft. She delivered the drinks, her hands steady, despite the turmoil inside her. As she placed the Kia Royale on its coaster, Arabella's phone, a brand-new iPhone encased in gold, buzzed on the table. It lay screen-up next to her plate. Arabella glanced at it, a flicker of annoyance crossing her perfect features, before she masked it with a radiant smile at Corbin. "It's just my brother Liam. So needy." She sighed, rolling her eyes playfully. "Always worried about me, in the big city." Corbin chuckled, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "He's a good brother. We should have him over for dinner at the penthouse next week." "Oh, darling, that would be lovely," she said, but her attention was on the phone. As Corbin took a slow sip of his scotch, mesmerized by the view, Arabella picked up her phone. Believing herself to be shielded by Corbin's angle and Maya's respectful distance, she unlocked it to reply. But Maya wasn't at a respectful distance. She was doing her job, standing a few feet away, her eyes scanning the table for any needs. And she saw it. She saw it all. Her eyes, trained to catch every detail, didn't mean to pry, but the screen was angled perfectly towards her. The wallpaper was a selfie of Arabella with another man, a handsome, smirking man with dark hair, both of them on a boat, the sun kissing their skin. It was definitely not her brother. And then the message preview at the top of the screen, from a contact named Liam. Liam. Did the old fool mention the Geneva transfer, yet need to book our flights to Bali? Don't forget the story about the charity donation. He'll fall for it. Maya felt the air leave her lungs. It was like a physical blow. This wasn't just a simple affair. It was a calculated predatory con. The old fool. The words echoed in the silent, screaming space of Maya's mind. She looked at Corbin Langley's face, at the genuine warmth in his eyes, as he looked at this woman, and felt a wave of protective fury. He wasn't a fool. He was a man in love, or at least in deep affection, and his trust was being weaponized against him. Her training, her every instinct for self-preservation screamed at her. Look away. Forget it. It's not your business. You need this job. The rent was due in a week. The final payment for her mother's headstone was overdue. Losing this job wouldn't just be an inconvenience, it would be a catastrophe. Marco, the restaurant manager, was a stickler for protocol, and bothering the clientele was the cardinal sin. But then she saw her mother's face in her mind's eye, her kind, tired face. She remembered the day her father left, the hollowed-out look of betrayal that had never quite faded. She had been a helpless child then. She wasn't now. Arabella finished her text, a small, triumphant smirk playing on her lips, before she composed her features back into a mask of innocence and placed the phone face down. The dinner continued. Course after course of exquisitely prepared food arrived and was cleared. Maya moved like an automaton, her mind racing. Every time Arabella laughed her tinkling laugh or touched Corbin's hand, Maya felt a fresh wave of disgust. She watched Corbin speak about his philanthropic work, about a new wing he was funding at the Met for emerging artists. He was passionate, engaged, and completely oblivious that the woman beside him was, allegedly, planning to reroute his charitable donations to a Bali getaway with her lover. The conflict inside Maya was a raging storm. To speak up was professional suicide. To stay silent felt like being an accomplice. Finally, as she served their espresso, her decision solidified. It was a terrifying, reckless, and possibly stupid decision. But it was the only one she could live with. Corbin was signing the bill, a heavy black credit card, already resting on the leather folio. Arabella had excused herself to the powder room, probably to call Liam, and finalize their plans. This was her only chance. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her palms were slick with wet. She took a deep, steadying breath, walked to the table, and stood beside Corbin Langley. "Mr. Langley," she began, her voice barely a whisper. He looked up from the bill, a questioning, but not unkind look in his eyes. "Yes, Maya. Was everything to your satisfaction?" "Everything was wonderful, sir. Thank you." Her throat felt tight. "Sir, I apologize for this gross breach of protocol. What I am about to say is unprofessional, and you have every right to have me fired for it." His brow furrowed slightly. He put his pen down, giving her his full attention. The sheer force of his focus was intimidating. "Go on." Maya swallowed hard, her gaze darting towards the entrance of the powder room, praying Arabella wouldn't return just yet. "Sir, trust it's the most valuable thing we have. It's more valuable than anything on this menu, more valuable than the view from this window." She was rambling, quoting herself from her internal monologue. She needed to be direct. When Ms. de Courcy was texting her, "Brother, earlier," she said, putting a slight, deliberate emphasis on the word brother. Her phone was angled towards me. I saw the screen. I wasn't trying to look, I swear, but it was unavoidable. Corbin's expression didn't change, but a stillness came over him. The air grew heavy. The messages she was sending and receiving, they weren't of a familial nature. Maya said, her voice shaking slightly but clear. "And they mentioned a Geneva transfer and a charity donation. Sir, I know this is none of my business, but I believe you are being profoundly deceived." She had said it. The words hung in the air, terrible and irreversible. Corbin Langley stared at her for a long moment. His face was an unreadable mask of stone. Maya couldn't tell if he was angry, shocked, or dismissive. She felt a cold dread seep into her bones. She had just detonated a bomb and had no idea what the fallout would be. He didn't speak. He simply picked up his pen, made a final decisive stroke on the receipt, and pushed the folio back towards her. And then the tinkling sound of an approaching laugh announced Arabella's return. Arabella glided back to the table, her smile perfectly in place. She saw Maya standing there, a little too close to Corbin, and her eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second. "Is everything all right, darling?" she asked, her voice dripping with sweetness as she placed a hand on Corbin's shoulder. Corbin looked from Maya's pale, determined face to Arabella's exquisitely beautiful one. The silence stretched thick and suffocating. Maya felt like a defendant awaiting a verdict. "Maya was just ensuring our experience was satisfactory," Corbin finally said, his voice unnervingly neutral. He folded the customer copy of the receipt and tucked it into his jacket pocket. He did not look at Maya again. Relief and terror warred within Maya. He hadn't exploded. He hadn't called for the manager. But he also hadn't acknowledged her words. He had simply shut down. Arabella, however, was no fool. She was a predator, and she had sensed a shift in the atmosphere. "Oh," she said, her eyes now cold and hard as emerald chips locking onto Maya. "And what exactly were you telling him, Waitress?" The title was flung like an insult, a clear demarcation of their respective places in the world. Maya's throat was dry. "I was just confirming the service was acceptable, Ms. de Courcy." "Is that so?" Arabella's smile was a predatory baring of teeth. She leaned closer to Corbin, whispering loud enough for Maya to hear. "She seems a bit familiar, don't you think? Probably angling for a bigger tip." The accusation was designed to humiliate, to reduce Maya's desperate act of integrity to a grubby cash grab. It stung sharply. Before Maya could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here, Mr. Langley?" It was Marco, the manager. He had the uncanny ability to appear whenever a situation deviated from the restaurant's meticulously crafted script. His face was a mask of professional concern, but his eyes darting between Maya and the VVIP guests held a glint of panic. Arabella seized the opportunity, turning the full force of her theatrical outrage on him. "Yes, there is a problem, Marco, a significant one. This waitress," she gestured dismissively at Maya, "has been completely unprofessional. She was intruding on our private conversation, telling my fiancé absurd and malicious stories." Fiancé. The word landed with the force of a physical blow. So that was the endgame. Marco's face paled. He turned to Maya, his expression hardening. "Maya, what is she talking about?" Maya began. But what could she say? The truth. She looked at Corbin, a silent plea for him to intervene, to give some sign that he'd heard her, that he believed her. He remained silent, his face a granite cliff. He simply stood up, pulling out Arabella's chair for her. It was a gesture of dismissal. He had made his choice, and it wasn't her. The cold, sick feeling of dread became a certainty. She had gambled and lost spectacularly. "This employee," Arabella continued, her voice rising with manufactured indignation, "accused me of the most disgusting things, insinuating that I am being unfaithful to Corbin. Can you imagine the audacity, this little nobody trying to poison our relationship?" The scene was beginning to attract attention. Diners at nearby tables were starting to glance over, their curiosity piqued. For a restaurant like Aurelia, this was a 5-alarm fire. Marco grabbed Maya's arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "My office." "Now!" He hissed, his voice low and furious. He then turned back to the couple, his face a symphony of apologies. "Mr. Langley, Ms. de Courcy, I am so profoundly sorry. I cannot imagine what got into her. This is not the standard of Aurelia. Of course, there will be no charge for your meal tonight. Please accept my deepest apologies for this mortifying disturbance." Corbin simply gave a curt nod, his eyes still unreadable. He guided a distraught Arabella, who was now dabbing at perfectly dry eyes towards the exit. Just before they left, Arabella glanced back over her shoulder at Maya. Her look was one of pure venomous triumph. The walk to Marco's shoebox-sized office was a walk of shame. The whispers of her fellow waiters followed her, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. She had broken the cardinal rule, and now she was being led to the slaughter. Marco closed the door, and the polished professional mask dropped entirely. His face was flushed with rage, Are you insane? He spat his voice, trembling with fury. Do you have any idea what you've just done? That was Corbin Langley. He doesn't just eat here, Maya. His company owns this entire building. His personal account is probably responsible for 15% of our annual revenue. Marco, Shut up, he roared, slamming his hand on his small desk. Just shut up. I don't want to hear your pathetic excuses. You think you're some kind of hero, some kind of righteous crusader. You're a waitress. Your job is to serve food and be invisible. Not to pass judgment on the lives of our guests. But she was robbing him blind, Maya cried, her voice breaking. I saw the messages. It was a con. I don't care if she was sacrificing a goat at the table. Marco yelled, his face inches from hers. You say nothing. You see nothing. That is the job. You just cost us our most important client. You've embarrassed the entire establishment. And you have certainly absolutely cost yourself your job. The words, though expected, still hit her with the force of a physical impact. Get your things, Marco said, his voice now cold and flat. You're fired. Your final paycheck will be mailed to you. Now get out of my sight before I call security to throw you out. Numbly, Maya walked to the staff locker room. The usual cheerful chatter was absent. Her colleagues avoided her eyes, shuffling away as she approached her locker. She was a pariah, an outcast. She quickly changed out of her uniform, the symbol of her now former life, into her worn jeans and thin t-shirt. As she stuffed the black uniform into her tote bag, her hand brushed against the tip folio from table 7. Marco, in his haste, had thrust it at her on the way to his office. With a trembling hand, she opened it. The bill was for $1,854,067. Corbin Langley had paid the full amount, and on the tip line he had written a single bold 0. But underneath the 0 on the merchant copy of the receipt that he had to have known she would see, he had scrawled 2 small, almost illegible words in pen. Thank you. Maya stared at the words, her mind reeling. What did it mean? Was it sarcasm? A cruel joke? Or was it a genuine acknowledgement? A sign that her kamikaze mission had on some level hit its target. It didn't matter. She was still fired. She was still facing an insurmountable pile of debt. And she was still utterly, terrifyingly alone. The elevator ride down from the 60th floor felt like a descent into hell. The doors opened into the glittering, indifferent lobby, and Maya walked out into the cool night air of a city that suddenly felt hostile and alien. The weight of her decision pressed down on her, crushing the air from her lungs. Tears she had refused to shed in front of Marco now streamed freely down her face. She had done the right thing. She knew it in her soul. But as she stood on the curb with less than $50 to her name and the prospect of eviction looming, doing the right thing felt an awful lot like losing. The next morning the world was grey. A dreary, drizzling rain wept against the single window of Maya's apartment, mirroring the bleak landscape of her future. She hadn't slept. The night had been a torturous marathon of replaying the scene at Aurelia, second-guessing her every move and staring at the growing pile of red-stamped bills on her small kitchen table. The 2 words on the receipt, "Thank you," had become a maddening enigma, a flicker of light in an overwhelming darkness that offered no real warmth. She was scrolling through a job site on her laptop. The listings for experienced fine dining server, feeling like a sick joke when a sharp, authoritative knock echoed on her apartment door. It wasn't the gentle tap of a neighbor or the buzzed-in arrival of a delivery person. This was a knock that expected to be answered. Wiping the tear stains from her cheeks, Maya padded to the door, her heart giving a nervous flutter. She peered through the peephole, her view distorted by the fisheye lens. A man stood in the dingy hallway. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal grey suit, with a severe haircut and an earpiece that was subtly visible. He looked completely out of place, like a Secret Service agent who had taken a very wrong turn. She hesitated, then slowly unlatched the 3 locks. "Can I help you?" she asked, opening the door just a crack. The man didn't smile. His expression was the one of polite professional neutrality. "Maya Rossi?" he asked, his voice crisp and direct. "Yes. My name is Arthur Chen. I have a delivery for you from my employer." "Your employer?" Maya asked, confused. "I didn't order anything." Mr. Chen didn't answer the question. Instead, he held out a box. It was sleek, black, and heavy, about the size of a shoebox, with no markings, no labels, no return address. It radiated an aura of expensive mystery. "I was instructed to deliver this to you personally, and to ensure you received it," he said, his gaze unwavering. Hesitantly, Maya took the box. It was cool and smooth to the touch. Who is it from?" she asked again. "My instructions are complete," Mr. Chen said, with a slight formal bow of his head. He then turned and walked down the hallway, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the worn linoleum. He didn't wait for a thank you. He simply disappeared down the stairwell. Maya stood in her doorway, holding the mysterious black box, her mind racing. Was this some kind of sick prank from Arabella? A box of horse manure, mafia style? She brought it inside, locking the door behind her, and placed it on her cluttered coffee table. For a full minute, she just stared at it. Finally, her curiosity overwhelmed her fear. She lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in soft black foam, were 2 items. The first was a brand new smartphone, the latest model also in black. It was sleek and cold. The second item stole her breath. It was a card, matte black made of anodized titanium. It felt heavy, substantial in her hand. In the bottom corner was the familiar American Express logo, but this was no ordinary credit card. And in the center, embossed in elegant silver lettering, was her name. Maya Rossi. It was an American Express Centurion card, the legendary black card, the ultimate invitation-only status symbol, reserved for the planet's wealthiest and most powerful individuals. It was an urban myth, a legend, something she had only heard whispers about from other waiters who had seen one maybe once in their entire careers. And it had her name on it. This had to be a mistake. A cruel, elaborate joke. She picked it up. It was real. The weight was undeniable. She ran her thumb over her embossed name. It was perfect. Beneath the foam cutout where the card had rested was a single folded piece of thick, cream-colored cardstock. Her hands trembling, Maya unfolded it. On it was a short message typed in a simple, clean font. Ms. Rossi. The 0 on the tip line was for the benefit of prying eyes. Your integrity, however, is priceless. What you did last night required a level of courage that is exceedingly rare. It also confirmed a suspicion I have held for some time, but for which I lacked definitive proof. You were fired because of me. I will not allow your courage to result in your ruin. This card is yours. It has no preset spending limit. Consider any debts you have to be settled. Consider your financial worries to be over. But this is not merely a gift. It is an invitation. I have a much larger problem than an unfaithful girlfriend. You have proven yourself to be observant, discreet, and brave. These are qualities I find myself in desperate need of. I am offering you a job, a role for which there is no formal title. Your first task is simple: acclimatize. Understand the world that people like Arabella inhabit. Buy new clothes, dine at Balthazar, visit the Frick collection. See the city not as a worker, but as a player. The phone in this box is encrypted and will be my sole means of communication with you. Await my instructions. Do not attempt to contact me through any other means. Do not discuss this with anyone. Your discretion is paramount. Welcome to the game. J.S. Maya sank onto her worn-out couch, the note fluttering from her fingers. She read it again, and again. Her mind struggled to process the sheer absurdity of the situation. No preset spending limit. An invitation. A game. J.S. Corbin Langley. The thank you on the receipt hadn't been a joke. It had been a promise. He had seen her. He had believed her. And this was the consequence. Her first reaction was disbelief, quickly followed by a wave of pure, unadulterated terror. This was insane. It was the plot of a spy movie, not the life of an art history student from the East Village. What game? What larger problem? She picked up the card again. Maya Rossi. Could it be real? With a sudden, impulsive need for proof, she grabbed her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She navigated to the NYU tuition payment portal, her outstanding balance glaring at her from the screen, $14,782. It was a figure that haunted her dreams. Her hands shook so violently, she could barely type. She entered her name, and then taking a deep breath, she entered the 16 digits from the heavy black card. She typed in the security code, the expiration date. She clicked Submit Payment. The processing icon spun for what felt like an eternity. She expected an error message, a card declined notification that would bring this insane fantasy crashing down to earth. Instead, the screen refreshed. Payment successful. Your current balance is $0. Maya stared at the screen, her eyes wide. A sound escaped her lips, a choked sob that was half disbelief, half euphoria. It was real. The debt that had been a crushing weight on her shoulders for years. The reason she worked punishing hours and subsisted on instant noodles was gone. Just like that. She looked at the pile of bills on her table. The final notice for her mother's medical expenses. $28,450. She logged into the hospital's payment system, entered the numbers, clicked Submit. Payment successful. The eviction notice from her landlord demanding 2 months of back rent. $4,200. She navigated to the online payment portal, clicked Submit. Payment successful. In the space of 5 minutes, Maya had erased every single cent of debt that had chained her to a life of quiet desperation. The feeling was so overwhelming, so seismic, that she felt dizzy. She stumbled to her small kitchen and splashed cold water on her face, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. It was the same face, the same tired eyes. But everything was different. The chains were gone. She walked back to the coffee table and picked up the new phone. It powered on without a setup screen opening directly to a simple clean home screen with only one app on it, a black icon with a silver S. She touched it. A secure messaging interface opened. There was one message received 2 minutes ago. Good. You've confirmed the card is real. Now your first lesson begins. Arabella believes she has won. She is celebrating with a shopping spree. She is currently at the Chanel boutique on Spring Street in Soho. Your task is not to confront her. It is to observe. Go to the same boutique. Buy something. Anything. And watch her. Learn her. Report back. A car is waiting for you downstairs. Maya's blood ran cold, then hot, with a thrill that terrified her. This was happening. Right now. She looked down at her frayed jeans and faded band t-shirt. She couldn't walk into a Chanel boutique dressed like this. But the note had said to acclimatize, to become a player. With a surge of adrenaline-fueled resolve, she walked to her closet, her mind no longer thinking about rent or debt, but about something far more dangerous and exhilarating the game she had just been invited to play. Stepping out of her building was like stepping into another reality. The drizzling rain had stopped, and parked at the curb, gleaming under the weak sunlight, was a black Mercedes-Benz S-Class. The driver, a different man from Mr. Chen, but with the same stoic professionalism, stepped out and opened the rear door for her without a word. The scent of rich leather and quiet power enveloped her as she slid into the back seat. This wasn't a taxi. It was a chariot. The 20-minute ride to Soho was a blur. Maya's mind was a frantic whirlwind of fear and exhilaration. She was an imposter, a wolf in, well, not even sheep's clothing yet. She was a mouse in mouse's clothing on her way to the wolf's den. She had done her best pulling on the one black dress she owned, simple from a thrift store, but clean and classic. Still, she felt utterly inadequate as the car pulled up a block away from the Chanel boutique. "The driver will wait," was the only thing the man said before she got out. Walking down Spring Street was different now. The storefronts that were once just glass panes to press her nose against were now possibilities. It was a dizzying thought. She saw the boutique, its iconic black and white awning, a beacon of unattainable luxury. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the heavy glass door. The air inside was hushed and fragrant, a temple of tweed and quilted leather. A sales associate with impossibly perfect posture and a polite assessing smile immediately approached her. "Bonjour, madame. Welcome to Chanel. Is there anything I can help you find today?" "I'm just looking," Maya stammered, feeling the woman's eyes flick over her simple dress and worn-out ankle boots. And then she saw her. Arabella was holding court in the center of the boutique. She was trying on a classic flap bag, admiring her reflection in a three-way mirror. She was laughing with her sales associate, a familiar tinkling sound that now sounded like grating metal to Maya. And standing next to her, holding a half-dozen shopping bags from other high-end stores, was her brother Liam. Seeing him in the flesh sent a jolt through Maya. He was handsome in a slick, predatory way, with a confident smirk that matched the photo on Arabella's phone. They weren't acting like siblings. They were acting like partners. The way his hand rested for a moment too long on the small of her back, the conspiratorial whisper, the shared smug glance, it was all there, clear as day. Maya quickly turned her back, her heart pounding. She had to follow the instructions. Observe, acclimatize, become a player. She walked over to a display of sunglasses, pretending to browse. She picked up a pair, using the reflective lenses to watch the scene unfold. Corbin felt so guilty about that little waitress making a scene, Arabella was saying, her voice carrying easily in the quiet store. He insisted I treat myself to make up for the trauma. She let out a peal of laughter. Liam smirked. "He's a good man." Liam said, his voice laced with an irony so thick it was almost sarcastic. "He's a perfect mark, Arabella corrected him in a lower voice, turning to adjust the bag on her shoulder. Did you speak with Zurich? The framework is in place, Liam murmured back. Once he transfers the seed money for your Children's Art Foundation, we can liquidate and disappear within 12 hours. Maya's blood ran cold. So that was it. The charity donation from the text message. It wasn't a few $1,000s. It was the seed money for a fake foundation, a multi-million-dollar exit strategy. She had to stay calm. She had to play her part. The sales associate who had greeted Maya was now hovering nearby, her polite smile wearing thin. Maya knew she had to do something, or she'd be politely asked to leave. She took a deep breath, walked over to a rack of jackets, and pulled one out at random. It was a classic tweed jacket in a shimmering navy blue. May I try this on? Maya asked, her voice more confident than she felt. The associate's professional demeanor snapped back into place. Of course, madame. This way. She led Maya to a private fitting room, its plush carpeting and soft lighting a world away from her apartment. The jacket slid on like it was made for her. She looked at herself in the mirror. For a second, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. The jacket transformed her, gave her an air of sophistication, of belonging. The associate fussed over the fit. It is exquisite on you. It is from our new collection. I'll take it. Maya said the words, feeling foreign on her tongue. The associate's eyes widened slightly. Very good, madame. Maya walked back out to the main floor, the jacket still on. She approached the register, her path taking her directly past Arabella and Liam. She kept her head down, her dark hair shielding her face. She pulled the Centurion card from her simple tote bag and placed it on the counter. The effect was instantaneous. The cashier's eyes, which had barely registered her, widened in recognition of the black titanium. His posture straightened. The sales associate who had been fawning over Arabella suddenly looked over, her professional smile faltering as she saw the card. Even Liam, who was scanning the room with a bored expression, noticed. His eyes flicked to the card, then to Maya. He didn't recognize her from the restaurant. She had been a ghost in a uniform then. But he saw the card, and his expression shifted to one of curiosity and assessment. He was sizing her up, categorizing her. The transaction was silent and swift. The cashier treated the card like a holy relic. Thank you, Miss Rossi, he said, handing it back to her with a new level of reverence. Her purchase was carefully wrapped in tissue paper and placed in a beautiful glossy white bag with a white camellia flower pinned to the handle. As Maya turned to leave, she deliberately met Liam's gaze for a fraction of a second. She gave him nothing. No smile, no acknowledgement, and then walked out of the store. Her hands were shaking as she got back into the waiting Mercedes. She had done it. She had walked into the lion's den, bought a jacket that cost more than her old car, and walked out unnoticed by her target, but noticed by the accomplice. She pulled out the new phone. Her fingers flew across the encrypted messaging app. Maya at Chanel. Arabella is here with her accomplice Liam. They are not siblings. They are partners. Overheard them discussing a Children's Art Foundation. It's a front. Plan is to have JS transfer seed money, then they will liquidate and disappear. The con is much bigger than cheating. She hit send. The delivered checkmark appeared instantly. A minute later, a reply came. JS, excellent work. Your instincts were correct. This is the larger problem I referred to. This foundation is their endgame. They are targeting my private collection, specifically Sunrise over Vetoil by Monet. Arabella has been talking about how it would be the perfect centerpiece for a charity auction. She wants me to donate it to her foundation. Maya gasped. She knew the painting. It was one of Monet's most beloved works, worth an estimated $80 to $90 million. This wasn't just a con. It was the art heist of the century, hidden in plain sight. J.S. You need to dig deeper. Arabella de Courcy is a ghost. It's an assumed identity. I've had my people run a background check, and it's a clean slate, which is impossible. She has to have a real identity she's hiding. She must have made a mistake somewhere, left a digital footprint. J.S. Your next task, find that mistake. You have unlimited resources. Hire anyone you need. Private investigators, forensic accountants, ethical hackers. Become the director of your own intelligence agency. Find out who Arabella de Courcy really is. The car is at your disposal. Maya stared at the message, her world tilting on its axis. Hire PIs, hackers. She was an art history student. What did she know about running an intelligence agency? But then she looked at the Chanel bag sitting beside her. She thought about the smug look on Arabella's face. And she thought about Corbin Langley, a man who, despite his immense power, had been made vulnerable by loneliness and trust. He had trusted Maya, a complete stranger, with this monumental task. He had empowered her. A new feeling began to displace the fear determination. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She wasn't a victim of circumstance. J.S. had given her a sword. It was time to learn how to use it. She leaned forward, her voice clear and steady, as she spoke to the driver. Take me to the New York Public Library, the main branch on Fifth Avenue. The driver nodded, pulling smoothly into traffic. The investigation of Maya Rossi had begun. She would start with what she knew art history and the meticulous research skills that had defined her academic life. Arabella had created a fictional character. Maya would use her knowledge of history and art to deconstruct it piece by piece until the ugly truth was exposed. The game was afoot, and for the first time in her life, Maya felt ready to play. The days that followed blurred into a surreal montage of purpose. Maya's small apartment transformed into a command center, the air thick with the thrill of the hunt. She attacked the problem as an art historian would, seeking the provenance of the forgery named Arabella de Courcy. The name itself, she quickly discovered through genealogical databases, was a lie, a phantom grafted onto a real aristocratic French family tree. Her first encrypted message to J.S. was concise. Maya de Courcy name is a fabrication. No record of her in the family's history. The reply was swift, providing the crucial breadcrumb, J.S. I suspected as much. She speaks of art with the fluency of a high-end gallery girl or auctioneer. Perhaps her past lies there. This insight shifted Maya's focus. A con artist wouldn't use her real name, but she couldn't change her face. This was where the true power of the black card came into play. Maya hired a boutique tech firm of white hat hackers, their fee a staggering sum that was approved without a blink. Her directive was simple. I am looking for this woman, she wrote, attaching a candid photo of Arabella. She may have worked in the European art world within the last 10 years, likely using a different name. I'm also looking for her male associate. For 3 tense days, there was silence. Maya continued her acclimatization. A task she now understood was about psychological armor. Lunch at Per Se, a tailored suit from the Row. These weren't indulgences, but strategic acquisitions. She was learning that in this world, clothing was armor, and your credit card was your weapon. On the 4th day, the email arrived. It contained a single grainy photograph from a 2018 Geneva newspaper article about a small, bankrupt gallery, Galerie du Bois. The photo was of the staff. In the back, looking younger, was Arabella. Beside her, with a possessive arm around her waist, was Liam. But their names were Cécile Dubois and Marco Bianchi. The article detailed how the gallery's respected owner, Jean-Pierre Dubois, had died of a sudden heart attack. His daughter Cécile inherited the business. Within 6 months, the gallery was stripped of its assets and buried in debt while Cécile and her boyfriend vanished. The authorities had ruled it a tragic mismanagement. No one suspected a con. Maya felt a cold surge of triumph. She had them. This was the provenance. She messaged JS immediately. Maya found them. Geneva, 2018. She is Cécile Dubois. He is Marco Bianchi. They bankrupted her father's gallery after he died. This is their pattern. The response came back almost instantly, laced with a cold fury she could feel through the screen. JS. My God. Jean-Pierre Dubois was a friend. He spoke so proudly of his daughter. They used his death, his trust in her, as their exit strategy. The cruelty is unfathomable. The Monet, the fake children's foundation. It all clicked into place. This wasn't just a corn. It was the desecration of a man's legacy. JS. The charity gala is in 3 days at the Frick. She thinks it's her coronation where I will announce the donation of the Monet. Instead, it will be her unmasking. You've given me the ammunition. Now we set the stage. Meet me tomorrow. 10 a.m. My office. The next morning, dressed in her new suit, Maya was escorted directly to Corbin Langley's penthouse office. The man who greeted her was not the weary victim from the restaurant, but a commander preparing for battle. Maya, he said, shaking her hand firmly. It is a profound pleasure to finally meet you properly. You've done what my entire security team could not. You saw the truth. He gestured to a screen on the wall displaying the photo of Cécile and Marco. I was lonely, and I was a fool for the fantasy she was selling. The trap is set, Corbin stated, his voice hard. At the gala during my speech, I will talk about my dear late friend, Jean-Pierre Dubois. And then I will put this picture on the screen for 300 of the city's most powerful people to see. I will let Cécile, sitting at the front table, explain herself. It was a public execution. Where do I fit in? Maya asked. You will be my guest of honor, Corbin said, a glint in his eye, as he handed her a thick invitation. I want you to be there to see the conclusion of the job you started. The night of the gala at the Frick Collection, Maya was transformed. A midnight blue couture gown and loaned diamonds were her armor. She was no longer Maya Rossi, the waitress. She was a woman of mystery seated at the most important table in the room. She saw them immediately. Cécile, radiant in crimson, was basking in the adoration, playing the role of the proud fiancée to perfection. Liam Marco was at a nearby table looking smug. Cécile's eyes widened in shock as she spotted Maya. Her mind, unable to compute how the little waitress she'd had fired, was now here a guest of honor. She whispered something to Corbin, who merely smiled. The air was electric with tension. Finally, Corbin walked to the podium. A hush fell. He began by speaking of art and philanthropy, praising his partner Arabella and her passion for creating a foundation for children. Cécile preened a triumphant smile on her face. This was her moment. This foundation, Corbin continued, his voice resonating through the hall, was inspired by the legacy of a dear friend of mine, a man I respected immensely. His name was Jean-Pierre Dubois. At the front table, Maya saw Cécile's smile shatter. The color drained from her face. Jean-Pierre had a daughter he adored. Corbin went on, his voice laced with sorrow. But after his death, his gallery was gutted and his legacy destroyed. For years I wondered what happened to his daughter and her boyfriend. And then, thanks to the integrity of a truly remarkable individual, I found out. He clicked a button. The massive screen behind him lit up with the grainy photo from the Geneva newspaper. The faces of Cécile Dubois and Marco Bianchi stared out at the silent, shocked crowd. "It turns out," Corbin said, his voice like ice, "they didn't disappear. They just changed their names, and they are with us here tonight." He turned his head and looked directly at his fiancée. "Isn't that right?" "Cécile." A collective gasp ripped through the room. Every eye swiveled to the front table. Cécile was a statue of horror, her carefully constructed world demolished. Marco was already bolting for the exit, only to be intercepted by discreet security men. Cécile stumbled to her feet, knocking her chair over, and fled into the glare of 100 staring eyes. There was nowhere to run. Later, as the chaos subsided, Corbin found Maya in the Frick's quiet courtyard. "It's over," he said. "It is," she agreed. "Your courage that night started all of this," he said, his eyes full of sincere gratitude. "You saved me from more than financial loss. The Centurion card is yours to keep, of course. But I have another offer. My work in unmasking frauds like Cécile. I don't want to do it alone anymore." He paused, his gaze direct. "I'm formalizing it. The Langley Art Integrity Foundation. It needs a director, someone with impeccable integrity, sharp observational skills, and a proven talent for investigation." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. "The job is yours if you want it," Corbin said. "You'll have a real office on the floor below mine. You'll be doing what you were born to do. Not serving the powerful, but protecting the beautiful." Maya looked at the magnificent sculptures surrounding them, timeless treasures that people like Cécile sought to exploit. She thought of the hopelessness she had felt just weeks ago, a feeling that now seemed a lifetime away. She had done the right thing, and it had led her here. Looking back at Corbin Langley, no longer a waitress, but an equal, a confident smile spread across her face. "Corbin," she said, "I accept." From a simple act of integrity in the face of impossible odds, an entire world was shattered and a new one was built. Maya Rossi's story isn't just about the incredible reward she received. It's a powerful reminder that true wealth isn't measured by bank accounts but by courage and character. She chose to do the right thing, not knowing where it would lead, and in doing so, she didn't just expose a lie. She uncovered her own extraordinary destiny. Her warning to a billionaire was a single stone thrown into a pond, and the ripples changed everything. What choices do we face every day where we could choose courage over silence? If this story of justice and unexpected fortune resonated with you, please show your support. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see that doing the right thing can change everything, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable real-life dramas. He laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was a weapon, sharp and cruel, echoing in the silent, opulent restaurant. All for a simple claim made by a waitress he had already dismissed as part of the furniture. "I speak 9 languages," she had said. The billionaire, a man who bought and sold empires before breakfast, thought he knew everything about value. But what if the most valuable secret in that room wasn't in his leather briefcase, but behind the tired eyes of the woman pouring his water? A secret spoken in a language he never imagined on. She could understand, a secret that was about to shatter his world. The Gilded Compass wasn't just a restaurant. It was a theater where New York's elite performed the play of their own importance. And Susan Thompson, dressed in her starched black uniform, was part of the stage crew. Her job was to be invisible yet omnipresent, to anticipate a need before it was spoken, to move like a ghost between tables laden with crystal glasses and plates that cost more than her monthly rent. For 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, she was a study in practiced deference. Her face was a polite mask, her movements economical, her spirit carefully locked away. Tonight the air was particularly thick with the scent of money and ambition. Susan moved through it with a practiced ease that belied the ache in her feet and the heavier ache in her heart. Each perfectly seared scallop she delivered, each vintage Bordeaux she poured, was a tiny step toward a goal that felt impossibly far away. That goal had a name, Leo. Her younger brother, Leo, was the sun her entire universe orbited. At 17, he should have been worried about college applications and prom dates. Instead, his world had shrunk to the 4 walls of their small apartment and the sterile white rooms of a hospital clinic. He was battling a rare autoimmune disorder that baffled doctors and came with a price tag designed for men like the ones dining at the Gilded Compass tonight. So Susan worked. She worked here until midnight, then worked as a freelance translator online from 1 a.m. until her eyes burned, catching a few hours of sleep before her morning shift at a diner. All for him. All to keep the sun from burning out. Her unusual upbringing had been both a blessing and a curse. Her parents were cultural anthropologists, nomads with PhDs who had dragged her and Leo across the globe. She'd learned Spanish on the streets of Madrid, German, in a Berlin market, and Japanese from an elderly neighbor in Kyoto. She could navigate conversations in Russian Mandarin and Portuguese. She'd learned Norwegian during 2 cold but magical years in Oslo, and French was the language of her mother's family. English was simply the string that tied them all together. 9 languages, fluent as a native in most. Her mind was a vibrant multicultural tapestry, but on her resume, it was just a novelty, a special skill that got her a polite nod before being offered a job that required only 2 words. "Yes, sir." A hush fell over the front of the restaurant, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that Susan was attuned to. It meant a big fish had arrived. She glanced toward the entrance and saw him. Edward Al-Fayed. She didn't need the maitre d's panicked whispers to know who he was. His face was plastered on business magazines, a modern Midas whose every venture turned to gold. He was younger than she expected, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to dissect everything they looked at, and a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than her car. There was an aura of impatience around him, as if the world was struggling to keep up with his thoughts. He was not alone. Flanking him were 2 older men. One was Scandinavian with pale, watery eyes and a tight smile, Mr. Larsen. The other was broad-shouldered with a Slavic hardness to his features, Mr. Petrov. Their expressions were a mixture of deference and cunning. This wasn't a social dinner. It was a battlefield, and the main course was a contract. "Your table is ready, Mr. Al-Fayed." The maitre d' breathed, bowing slightly. Edward didn't acknowledge him. His gaze swept the room, cataloguing, assessing, dismissing. His eyes passed over Susan without a flicker of recognition. To him, she was just another cog in the machine that served his needs. "Make sure we are not disturbed," Edward said, his voice a low, commanding baritone. It was the kind of voice used to closing billion-dollar deals and ending careers with a single sentence. As Susan watched them settle into the best table in the house, the secluded corner booth with a panoramic view of the city, a familiar sense of weariness washed over her. They were from a different world, a world of power and privilege she could only observe through the looking glass. Tonight she would serve them, smile politely, and fade into the background. She would pour their wine, clear their plates, and they would never know that the silent woman filling their water glasses held a universe of words inside her. The table was a vortex of tension. From the moment he sat, Edward Al-Fayed was a man displeased with the universe. The water was not cold enough. The ambient light was a fraction too dim. The bread, a complimentary artisan sourdough praised by critics, was uninspired. Each complaint was delivered to Susan with an air of profound disappointment, as if her personal failings were the source of his irritation. Susan absorbed each critique with the practiced grace of a seasoned professional. "Of course, sir. I will bring you a new bottle with ice." "My apologies, sir. I will have the lighting adjusted." "I can recommend the focaccia, sir. It is baked fresh this evening." She was a mirror reflecting back only a calm, polished surface, giving his condescension nothing to hold on to. This, she knew from experience, was the most infuriating response for a man like him. He wanted a reaction, fear, anger, frustration. He wanted to see his power affect her. She gave him nothing but flawless service. The business talk began, and Susan tuned it out, focusing on the rhythm of her work. But it was hard to ignore the palpable energy. Edward was pursuing a massive energy deal, a merger that would solidify his company's dominance for the next 50 years. It was she overheard him say his father's vision, a legacy he was now tasked with completing. The stakes were clearly more than just financial. They were deeply personal. The inciting incident came from a moment of camaraderie. As Susan was leaving the kitchen, a new busboy, Miguel, stopped her, his face a knot of worry. "Susan, the party at table 7. They're from Brazil. My English, it is not so good. Can you ask them about allergies?" Susan smiled warmly. "Don't worry, Miguel." She approached the table and in flawless Portuguese had a brief, friendly conversation with the guests who lit up at the sound of their native tongue. They were fine and grateful. As she turned away, she saw her manager, Mr. Davies, watching with an appreciative nod. "Your skills are a gift to this restaurant, Susan," he said quietly as she passed. "I'm happy to help," she replied. Unfortunately, the exchange had not gone unnoticed. Edward's table was close enough to overhear. As Susan approached to refill his water, Edward looked up, a smirk playing on his lips. He was bored with his business and had found a new target for his amusement. "Quite the performer," he began, not even looking at her directly, but speaking for the benefit of Larson and Petrov. "I heard you just now. Portuguese, was it? Tell me, how many of those little party tricks do you have?" Susan froze for a microsecond, her hand hovering over his glass. The phrase, "party tricks," felt like a deliberate sting. She placed the pitcher down softly. "I speak a few languages, sir," she said, her voice even and low. Edward leaned back, enjoying this. "A few. Don't be modest. My associate here, Mr. Petrov, was just saying how impressed he was." Petrov offered a thin, insincere smile. "Come now, Waitress, entertain us. How many?" The word waitress was delivered with a particular emphasis designed to remind her of her place. Susan straightened her spine. The mask of politeness was still there, but behind it a spark of defiance ignited. She was tired. Tired of being underestimated. Tired of being invisible. She thought of Leo, of the medical jargon she had to translate in her head, of the German specialists she emailed in the dead of night. Her languages were not tricks. They were her life, her history, her only real asset. She met his gaze directly. "I speak 9 languages, sir." Silence. Then came the laugh. It started as a low chuckle and erupted into a full-throated braying laugh of pure disbelief and ridicule. It was a sound so loud and contemptuous it turned heads across the dining room. Larsen and Petrov joined in their sycophantic chuckles, following their leader's cue. Edward wiped a tear of mirth from his eye. 9, he exclaimed, slapping the table lightly. "Did you hear that? 9 languages, and she's here pouring our water." He shook his head, looking at Susan as if she were a curious insect. "A fantastic story, truly. You should write a book." He dismissed her with a flick of his wrist, a gesture of absolute finality, and turned back to his associates. Now, where were we? The logistics of the Stavanger port acquisition. Susan stood there for a moment that stretched into an eternity. Every eye in the room was on her. The heat of humiliation crept up her neck, a hot, suffocating tide. She wanted to say something to list the languages off like a declaration of war, to wipe the smug look off his face. But she couldn't. She needed this job. Leo needed this job. So she did the only thing she could. She picked up the water pitcher, her movements perfectly steady, and walked away. But as she retreated into the shadows of the restaurant, the sound of his laughter followed her, a stain she couldn't wash away. Humiliation was a bitter taste, one Susan had learned to swallow. She retreated to the relative anonymity of the service station, her hands mechanically polishing wine glasses that were already spotless. The sound of Edward Al-Fayed's laughter was seared into her memory. 9 languages. And she's here, pouring our water. The words were meant to define her, to put her in a box labeled unambitious or delusional. He had no idea that the box she was in was not a choice, but a cage built of medical debt and fierce protective love. She took a deep breath, pushing the anger down. Anger was a luxury she couldn't afford. It didn't pay for Leo's experimental treatments or put food on their table. Only endurance did. She had to endure this man, this night, this job. For Leo. Her mantra. Returning to the floor, she resumed her duties, her polite mask firmly back in place. Edward and his associates were deep in discussion again. Their conversation was in English, a complex tapestry of financial terms, equity transfers, liability clauses, holding companies. Susan caught snippets as she moved silently around their table. The deal was for a series of offshore energy platforms in the North Sea. It was incredibly complex, and for Edward, incredibly important. He spoke of his late father's dream to pioneer sustainable, deep-sea energy and how this deal was the culmination of that dream. For the first time, she heard a note of something other than arrogance in his voice, passion, and perhaps a touch of vulnerability. Then the shift happened. It was subtle. Mr. Larsen, the Norwegian, leaned forward and said something in English about a minor logistical point regarding shipping routes. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, he switched languages. Larsen leaned in and said quietly in Norwegian, "Let's talk about the real numbers for Winterly's holding." Petrov nodded, replying in Norwegian, "He's swallowing it whole. He's so focused on his father's legacy that he isn't seeing the details. Susan's heart stopped. It was Norwegian. Crisp, clear, colloquial Norwegian. A language she hadn't spoken regularly in years, but one that was etched into her mind from 2 years of childhood spent exploring the snowy streets and deep fjords of Norway. She remembered the scratchy wool sweaters, the taste of salty licorice, the long, dark winters, and the midnight sun. The language came back to her not as a translation, but as an immediate, visceral understanding. They thought they were safe. They had likely profiled Edward Al-Fayed perfectly, a worldly man, certainly fluent in English, and his native Arabic, maybe some French for business. But Norwegian. It was an obscure choice, a linguistic gamble that in a New York City restaurant was almost a guaranteed win. They were counting on the arrogance of men like Edward, who assumed the world would always accommodate them by speaking their language. They were using their own tongue as a cloak of invisibility. Susan continued her work, her movements automatic. But her ears were now finely tuned instruments, capturing every treacherous word. She refilled the bread basket, her posture one of deferential service, while her mind raced. Larsen murmured, continuing in Norwegian. The debt is hidden in the third subsidiary. Petrov added his words, slipping out in rapid Norwegian. Once the transfer is complete, we will declare it bankrupt. Al-Fayed will be left with the platforms, but we will have drained the liquidity. They were planning to gut him. They weren't just negotiating a tough deal. They were setting a trap. They were using his father's legacy, the very thing driving him as bait. The company they were calling Winterlease Holding Winter Light Holding was a shell loaded with hidden debt that would activate post-merger and cripple Edward's corporation from the inside. Susan felt a cold dread mix with a hot surge of fury. The man at the table was arrogant, cruel, and had humiliated her without a second thought. He didn't deserve her help. He deserved to be taken down a peg. But this was different. This wasn't just business. It was calculated deception. It was theft on a grand scale. She watched Edward, who was nodding along, looking at the English version of the documents, completely oblivious to the venom being spoken just inches from his ears. She saw the passion in his eyes when he spoke of his father, the weight of the legacy he carried. He was a bully, but he was a bully about to be devoured by sharks. Her conscience was at war with her pride. Why should she care? He saw her as nothing. Intervening would be an incredible risk. She could be fired on the spot for interrupting, for overstepping her bounds in the most spectacular way. And for what? To save a man who had laughed in her face, she picked up a stray napkin, her mind a whirlwind. Then she thought of Leo and the fierce, desperate fight to give him a fair chance against an unfair disease. She thought of all the times she'd felt powerless against forces bigger than herself. In that moment, Edward Al-Fayed wasn't a billionaire. He was just another person about to be crushed by a system rigged against him. And she, the invisible waitress, was the only person in the world who could see the gears of the trap closing in. The decision crystallized in her mind, not as a heroic impulse, but as a quiet, firm resolve. She wouldn't let this happen. It wasn't about saving Edward Al-Fayed, the billionaire. It was about her own code, a refusal to stand by and watch a blatant act of treachery unfold, especially when she was the only one who could stop it. Her pride could weather the insult, but her integrity could not bear the weight of inaction. She had to be smart. She couldn't just walk over and announce, "Gentlemen, I speak Norwegian and you're crooks." They would deny it, and Edward, already primed to see her as a delusional fantasist, would have her thrown out. She would be dismissed as a crazy, disgruntled employee. No, the warning had to be a scalpel, not a sledgehammer, a single precise cut, to sow chaos and doubt in their conspiracy. Her opportunity came when Mr. Davies, the manager, tasked her with presenting the table with a special offering from the cellar. "Mr. Al-Fayed is a top client," he whispered. "Offer them a glass of our finest aquavit on the house. It's a Norwegian label, very exclusive." It was perfect, a gift from the universe. Susan returned to the table carrying a silver tray with 3 small, chilled glasses and an ornate bottle. She approached with her usual quiet grace. "Gentlemen," she said in English, her voice calm and professional. "Our manager would like to offer you a complimentary digestif. It is a Keimerud hillside aged aquavit." Edward waved a dismissive hand. "We're not interested." But Larsen's eyes lit up. "Our Kimmerud, an excellent choice." Susan placed the glasses down. As she poured the golden liquid, she looked directly at Larsen and Petrov, ignoring Edward completely. Then she switched languages. Her Norwegian was not the formal, stilted version of a student. It was the easy, colloquial dialect of someone who had lived it. As she poured the golden liquid, Susan smiled and said in fluent Norwegian, picked up from her childhood in Oslo, "I hope you enjoy it. It has a complexity that can be surprising if one isn't paying attention." The effect was instantaneous and electric. Larsen, who had been reaching for his glass, froze mid-motion. His hand hovered in the air as the color drained from his face. Petrov's jaw tightened, and he shot a panicked, incredulous look first at Susan, then at Larsen. They looked like 2 card cheats who had just seen the dealer reveal an ace up her own sleeve. Edward, meanwhile, was completely oblivious. He understood nothing of the exchange, only saw his associates' bizarre reactions. He looked at them with annoyance. "What's wrong with you two?" "It's just a drink." Larsen recovered first, forcing a brittle smile. He replied to Susan in heavily accented English. "Yes, thank you. Very kind." He was trying to regain control to shut down the Norwegian channel she had just brazenly opened. He refused to acknowledge that she had spoken his language. But Susan wasn't finished. She gave them a small, knowing smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. As she placed the last glass down, she added one more sentence in Norwegian, her voice barely a whisper meant only for them. She leaned in slightly and added whispering in Norwegian. Sometimes the most important details are hidden in what isn't said aloud. With that, she turned and walked away, her back straight, her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't look back, but she could feel the daggers of their stares. She had just lit a match in a room full of gasoline. The quiet confidence of the 2 conspirators had shattered, replaced by a frantic, paranoid energy. Their safe private conversation had been compromised, and they had no idea by how much. They started speaking again in English, their words now stilted and cautious, the easy flow of their deception completely gone. Edward watched them, his brow furrowed in confusion. He could sense the sudden shift in the room's temperature, the sudden iciness between his partners. He couldn't understand what had happened, but he knew with the sharp instinct of a predator that something was wrong. His gaze drifted across the restaurant and landed for the first time with a flicker of genuine curiosity on the waitress who was now calmly taking an order at another table. The waitress who claimed to speak 9 languages. The carefully constructed illusion of a cordial business dinner had evaporated. In its place was a thick, unbreathable tension. Susan's subtle 2-pronged attack in Norwegian had done more than just startle Larsen and Petrov. It had infected them with a virulent paranoia. They now saw her not as a simple waitress, but as a ghost who had heard their secrets. Every time she approached another table, they followed her with their eyes. Every time she passed their booth, they fell silent, their shoulders tensing. Their private channel of communication had been compromised, and the knowledge that their treachery was known even by a seemingly powerless woman had thrown their entire plan into jeopardy. Edward Al-Fayed was a predator by nature, and his instincts were screaming that something was wrong. He couldn't decipher the specifics, but he could read the room. The easy camaraderie between his two associates was gone, replaced by a stilted formality. Their smiles were brittle, their eye contact fleeting. They had the nervous energy of men who knew a hidden camera was watching them. He replayed the moment in his mind again and again, the waitress speaking in a language he didn't recognize, and the immediate visceral shock on Larsen's and Petrov's faces. It was a piece of a puzzle he couldn't solve, and it was making him dangerously uneasy. He was a man who prided himself on control, and for the first time all evening, he felt he had none. Sensing their window of opportunity closing, the two conspirators decided to force the endgame. Their subtlety vanished, replaced by a desperate urgency. "Edward, it has been a long negotiation, but a fruitful one." Larsen began, attempting a warm smile that didn't reach his cold, panicked eyes. He pushed the heavy leather-bound contract folder toward the center of the table. "To finally bring your father's vision to life, it is an honor. We should not delay the celebration any longer." Petrov chimed in his voice, a low, persuasive rumble. "Everything is in order, exactly as we discussed. The asset transfer, the Port Authority clearances, all just waiting for your signature. Let us seal this historic moment together." Their words were slick with flattery, appealing to the very thing they had identified as his weakness, his legacy. They were trying to rush him past his own instincts, to get his ink onto the paper before the strange, inexplicable dread in the room could coalesce into a concrete thought. Edward looked down at the document. It represented years of work, the culmination of a dream he had inherited. Everything he wanted was right there. His instincts screamed caution, but his ambition whispered sign. He picked up his custom-made Mont Blanc pen, its familiar weight a comfort in his hand. The quiet, authoritative click as he uncapped it seemed to be the starting pistol for the final act. Across the room, Susan watched her heart, a frantic drum against her ribs. Her subtle warnings had been a spark, but they hadn't started the fire. They had made the sharks nervous, but it wasn't enough to stop the attack. She saw the pen in Edward's hand, saw him positioning its nib over the signature line. The moment was here. It was now or never. In a split second, her decision was made. Caution was a luxury for people with nothing to lose. She had everything to lose, which meant she had to risk it all. She picked up a heavy glass pitcher of ice water, her movements practiced and calm, betraying none of the storm raging inside her. She started her approach to the table, her path a calculated trajectory of interception. This had to look like an accident, a clumsy, mortifying, but utterly believable mistake. As she drew level with the booth, just as Edward's pen was about to touch the paper, she executed her move. She feigned a slight stumble, her ankle twisting, just so her body lurching forward with a small, convincing gasp. The pitcher in her hand tilted past the point of no return. Time seemed to slow as a sheet of ice-cold water surged from the pitcher's lip. It was a controlled demolition. The cascade crashed onto the polished table, spreading in a wave of chaos. It soaked the fine linen napkins splashed against the side of Petrov's $1,000 suit jacket and created a dark, spreading stain on the edge of the leather contract folder. "Oh my goodness, I am so terribly sorry," Susan cried out, her voice a pitch-perfect symphony of horror and embarrassment. "How could I be so clumsy? Please forgive me." The reaction was instantaneous. Larson and Petrov shot back in their seats as if the water were acid, cursing under their breath. Edward, startled, snatched the precious folder away from the encroaching puddle, his face a thundercloud of fury at the interruption. The feigned accident gave Susan the perfect cover. In the midst of the frantic scramble, she grabbed a thick napkin and rushed to Edward's side, ostensibly to help contain the damage. She dabbed frantically at the table, her head bowed low in a gesture of profound apology and shame. "Sir, I am so sorry. This is inexcusable," she babbled in English, her panicked voice loud enough for all to hear. But then she leaned closer, her mouth just inches from his ear, her body shielding the movement from his associates. Her voice dropped to a low, urgent, and perfectly clear whisper that cut through her own manufactured noise. "Do not sign." She breathed the words, a staccato burst of secret intelligence. "It's a trap. Section 7B of the Annex. The subsidiary in Stavanger they call Winterlease Holding. It's a shell corporation, a ghost. It's loaded with toxic debt they've hidden off balance sheet. The moment you sign, they activate it. It will drain your liquidity and cripple your company from the inside. Check their asset declarations against the Norwegian National Corporate Registry. I promise you it does not exist." She pulled back just as quickly, her face still a mask of utter mortification. "I will get my manager immediately. I am so sorry, sir." Edward didn't hear her final apology. Her whispered words had landed like bullets in his brain, each one precise, technical, and devastatingly credible. Stavanger. Winterlease Holding. Section 7B. These were not the ramblings of a disgruntled waitress. This was the specific language of high-level corporate espionage. In a blinding flash of insight, the entire evening clicked into place, the secretive switch to a foreign language, his partner's terrified reaction to this very woman, and now this impossible specific warning. She understood them. She understood everything. The fury on his face was replaced by an icy, dangerous calm. The puzzle was solved, and the picture it revealed was horrifying. He had been played for a fool, and the woman he had ridiculed was the only one who had seen it. He calmly capped his pen, the soft click now sounding like a gunshot in the tense silence. He looked past Larson and Petrov, his gaze distant. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze mercury. "My apologies. It appears I just received an urgent message from my legal counsel in Geneva. They've flagged a last-minute discrepancy in the international liability clauses." He stood up, gathering the slightly damp folder. His movements were deliberate, final. "We're done for tonight. The signing is postponed indefinitely." Larson's face contorted in a desperate panic. "Edward, that's ridiculous. It's the middle of the night in Geneva. Let's not let a clumsy waitress derail this historic moment." Edward's gaze finally settled on Larson, and his eyes were chips of obsidian. "Do not," he said, his voice lethally soft. "Speak to me about clumsiness." Without another word, he turned and strode out of the restaurant, leaving his two would-be partners sitting in stunned, watery silence, their perfect trap utterly, inexplicably, and completely destroyed. The fallout was a silent explosion, ripping through the manufactured calm of the restaurant. After Edward's decisive departure, Larson and Petrov remained frozen for a moment, their faces a mask of disbelief and incandescent fury. A heated, frantic exchange erupted between them in Norwegian sharp, guttural words of blame and panic. Susan, standing by the service station, didn't need to listen closely to understand its panicked tenor. Their grand deception had crumbled into dust at the hands of a waitress. Without another glance at anyone, they threw a handful of $100 bills onto the table, far more than the check required, and stormed toward the exit. As Petrov passed the service station, his eyes met Susan's for a fleeting second, and in them she saw a look of pure, unadulterated hatred that chilled her to the bone. Then they were gone, swallowed by the New York night. The restaurant began its slow nightly exhale. The remaining patrons, oblivious, finished their desserts and departed, their laughter and chatter fading until only the staff remained. Susan moved through the familiar closing rituals in a state of profound disconnect. Her hands polished glasses, folded linens, and wiped down tables, but her mind was miles away, caught in a high-stakes replay of the evening. The fear, which had been a low hum beneath the adrenaline, now roared to life. She hadn't just overstepped a boundary, she had nuked it from orbit. Spilling water, whispering to a client, deliberately sabotaging a major business deal, any one of those offenses was a fireable one. She had committed all three. Her manager, Mr. Kaur Davies, was watching her, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. He surely saw the dramatic exit of Edward's associates. He must have questions. Susan braced herself for the inevitable. "Susan, can I see you in my office?" But it never came. He just gave her a long, unreadable look before disappearing into the back. Each minute that ticked by was a fresh wave of anxiety. She expected security to escort her out. She expected to be told her final paycheck would be mailed. Instead, there was only the quiet, rhythmic clinking of cutlery being sorted and the low hum of the floor polisher. Finally, just as she was in the staff room untying the apron that felt like a condemned prisoner's shackles, Miguel appeared at the door. His young face was pale. "Susan," he whispered, as if afraid to be overheard. "He's still here. The rich man, Mr. Al-Fayed. He waited for everyone to leave. He's in the main dining room and he's asking for you." A block of ice solidified in Susan's stomach. This was it. It was so much worse than being fired by Mr. Davies. Edward Al-Fayed, a man whose net worth was greater than the GDP of a small country, had waited specifically to dismiss her himself. It was a power move, a final personal assertion of his dominance. She imagined him calmly dissecting her audacity, perhaps even threatening legal action for her interference. Taking a deep, ragged breath, she nodded at Miguel, straightened her uniform, and walked out to face her executioner. The dining room was transformed. Stripped of its patrons and fine linens, it was a cavern of shadows and echoes. A single light burned above the corner booth, where Edward sat, a solitary figure against the glittering backdrop of the city skyline. The table had been cleared and wiped clean. He had a sleek silver laptop open its glow, illuminating his face. The arrogant, dismissive billionaire from hours ago was gone. The man who watched her approach looked weary, intense, and deeply contemplative. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Please," he said. His voice was quiet, stripped of its commanding edge. "Sit down." Susan sat perching on the very edge of the velvet seat. She felt exposed, a specimen under a microscope. Her hands, clasped in her lap, were trembling slightly. He was silent for a full minute, simply studying her, his dark eyes searching for something she couldn't name. Finally, he spoke, his voice a low rumble. Winterlease Holding. He said the name of the shell company, sounding alien in the quiet room. He tapped a finger on his laptop screen. I made a call to my head of security in Zurich, a man who is very good at finding things people want to keep hidden. He in turn made 2 calls to a discreet contact in Oslo. It took them less than 20 minutes to confirm everything. He looked up from the screen and met her gaze directly. The full weight of his attention was on her, but it was no longer accusatory. It was awestruck. The company is a phantom, a legal fiction registered to a post office box designed to hold an astronomical amount of hidden debt. Your words, toxic debt. Drain liquidity. That's exactly what my contact said. They would have used my own capital to bankrupt me from the inside. It would have been a catastrophic scandal, one that would have destroyed my company and tarnished my father's name forever. He leaned back, shaking his head slowly in disbelief. You didn't just save me from a bad deal, Ms. Thompson. You saved my entire life's work. The question I have is not what you did, but how you did it. It was the moment of truth. There were no more veils to hide behind. Susan took a breath and began to speak the story of her life, spilling into the quiet, empty restaurant. She told him about her parents, the brilliant, wandering anthropologists who saw languages not as tools, but as keys to the human soul. She shared a memory of being a little girl in Oslo, trading English swear words with a fisherman's son for the proper way to ask about the catch of the day. Her father laughing and saying, "That's how you truly learn a language, through connection, not just conjugation." She then spoke of the darkness, the phone call from an Italian policeman, the world-shattering finality of losing both parents in an instant. She described becoming a guardian overnight, the crushing weight of responsibility for her younger brother Leo. Her voice wavered slightly as she told him about Leo's illness, the sterile smell of hospitals, the cold terror of hearing doctors use words like chronic and experimental. She explained the relentless grinding cycle of her life, serving the wealthy by night at the Gilded Compass, serving faceless corporate clients as a freelance translator in the dead of night, to chase down the towering mountain of medical debt. My languages aren't party tricks, Mr. Al-Fayed. She concluded, her voice regaining its strength. They are my inheritance. They're the voices of my parents in my head. And right now, they're the only weapon I have to keep my brother alive. As she spoke, Edward listened with an unnerving stillness. The transformation in him was profound. He saw the world through her eyes for a moment, a world of struggle, resilience, and fierce protective love. The image of himself laughing so full of arrogance and casual cruelty flashed in his mind, and a hot, unfamiliar shame washed over him. He had mocked the very skills that had just saved him. He had belittled the struggle of a woman who possessed more integrity and intelligence than the 2 corporate sharks he had almost partnered with. When she finished, he finally broke his silence. I was a fool. He said the words, stark and sincere. My behavior tonight was inexcusable. I apologize. He looked down at his hands, then back at her. I owe you a debt that no amount of money can ever truly repay. But I have to try. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers, his voice now imbued with a new urgent purpose. I am offering you a job, not as a translator. I'm creating a new position for you, special advisor to the CEO. You'll work with me directly. Your mind, the way you see and hear the world. It's not just a skill, it's a superpower in my world. I need your perspective. I need your insight. He named a salary that was so immense, so utterly reality-altering, that Susan felt dizzy. It was a number from a different universe. But he wasn't finished. More importantly, he said, his voice softening, Leo, you and he will be on my private jet to Geneva tomorrow morning. There is a private clinic there, nestled in the mountains. They are pioneers leading the world in immunological research. They have a new treatment, a revolutionary one that they believe could be effective for his condition. Every cost will be covered. The best doctors, the best care for, as long as it takes. His health will be my personal priority. He extended his hand across the table. It wasn't a gesture of power, but one of partnership. This is not charity, Miss Thompson. This is a desperate CEO trying to hire the most qualified person he's ever met. It was a lifeline. It was a miracle. It was everything she had ever fought for, prayed for, and despaired of ever finding. It was a golden ladder lowered into the darkness of the pit she had been trapped in for so long, offering a way out into the sun. Susan looked at the hand extended across the table, a hand that could sign checks for billions of dollars, a hand that held the key to Leo's future and her own. It was a lifeline, a miracle spun from the threads of a disastrous evening. Everything in her, the part that was exhausted from years of fighting, the part that lay awake at night, terrified for her brother, screamed to take it without a second thought, to say yes to express her undying gratitude and to gratefully accept the gilded key he was offering. But as she looked at him, she didn't just see a savior. She saw the man from earlier in the evening, the arrogant billionaire who had used his power to casually humiliate her. He was changed, yes, humbled by the evening's events, but power she knew had a tendency to reset itself. If she accepted this role as his employee, a recipient of his magnificent generosity, the dynamic would always be skewed. She would forever be the waitress he had saved. Her courage had not been an application for a job. It had been an act of integrity. She owed it to herself and to the person she wanted to become to negotiate this moment not as a beggar, but as a discoverer of treasure who was now setting the price. She did not take his hand. Instead, she folded her own on the table, a quiet gesture of resolve that made him pause, his hand still hovering in the air. "Thank you, Mr. Al-Fayed," she began, her voice steady and clear, echoing slightly in the vast empty room. "It is an overwhelmingly generous offer. The care for Leo, it's an answer to a prayer I was too tired to even make anymore. For that I will be eternally grateful, but I cannot accept the job under those terms." Edward's eyebrows knitted together in confusion. He slowly retracted his hand. "I don't understand. The salary, the position—" "It isn't about the money or the title," she interrupted gently but firmly. "It's about the purpose. For the last 5 years, I've been invisible. I've served men and women like you people who hold the fate of thousands in their hands, and I've seen the world from the outside in. Do you have any idea how much brilliance this world wastes? How much genius is stocking shelves, driving cabs, or pouring coffee because they were born into the wrong circumstances or hit by a single stroke of bad luck?" She leaned forward, her eyes ignited with a fire he had not seen before. This was not the timid waitress or the grateful victim. This was a leader. "You have a philanthropic division, I'm sure of it. It probably funds galas at the Met and puts the Al-Fayed name on a new wing of a hospital. That's not philanthropy, that's brand management. I'm proposing something real." Her vision, born of years of quiet observation and personal struggle, came pouring out. "I don't want to be just your advisor. I want you to give me the seed capital to start a new foundation, a real one with a mission to find and empower the brilliant people this world has thrown away. I want to build a global network to identify individuals with extraordinary talents trapped by circumstance. We won't give them handouts. We'll give them what they actually need. Medical care, debt relief, a mentor, a foot in the door. We'll remove the boulder that's pinning them down so they can finally stand up and show the world what they can do. I will run it. And I won't do it for you, Mr. Al-Fayed. I will do it with you, as a founding partner. She sat back, the audacity of her demand hanging palpably in the air between them. She hadn't just asked for a different job description. She had demanded a seat at the head of the table, a partnership in reshaping his legacy. Edward stared at her, utterly speechless. He had come here tonight expecting to complete a transaction, to repay a debt by offering a job. He thought he was hiring a uniquely skilled translator. But in the space of a few minutes, the woman before him had dismantled his offer and presented him with something infinitely larger and more profound. She wasn't asking for a salary. She was challenging his entire worldview. She was offering him not just a way to repay his debt to her, but a way to give his immense wealth a meaning that went beyond the cold logic of the stock market. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face, reaching his eyes for the first time. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated admiration. "Ms. Thompson," he said, his voice now filled with a respect that was deeper than mere gratitude. "You have more courage and vision than my entire board of directors combined. Your counteroffer is accepted. The Thompson Al-Fayed Compass Initiative, should you agree to the name, is hereby founded." The following months were a whirlwind of radical, exhilarating change. The flight to Switzerland on Edward's private jet felt like ascending to another reality. Seeing Leo settled in a pristine clinic overlooking Lake Geneva, surrounded by doctors who spoke of hope and possibility instead of limitations, was a moment of such profound relief that Susan wept. It was the first time in years her tears were of joy, not fear. She dove into her new dual role with ferocious energy. In the boardroom of Al-Fayed Global, she was a quiet storm. Executives who initially dismissed her as the CEO's new pet project were quickly silenced by her razor-sharp insights. She could read the subtle cultural cues in a video conference with Japanese investors that the rest of the team missed, and she could identify the flaw in a marketing campaign for the Middle East by pointing out a single, poorly chosen word. But her true passion was the Compass Initiative. With Edward's full backing, she built it from the ground up, hiring a small, dedicated team to search for hidden geniuses. Their first success was a 19-year-old girl from a Brazilian favela who had taught herself advanced coding on a discarded laptop. The initiative provided her a full scholarship to MIT. Their second was a middle-aged accountant in Poland who was a chess grandmaster, but had never had the funds to compete internationally. They became his official sponsor. 6 months after that fateful night, Susan stood on a stage in London, beside Edward, launching the foundation to the world. A video call with a beaming, healthier-looking Leo, who thanked Edward, and the foundation's anonymous donors left not a dry eye in the house. Weeks later, back in the penthouse office of the Al-Fayed Tower, Susan and Edward were facing a crisis. A multi-billion-dollar merger with a Kyoto-based tech firm was about to collapse. "They're pulling out," Edward said, pacing in frustration. "My team says we've met every demand, but their chairman, Mr. Tanaka, remains distant. He says our proposal lacks harmony." What does that even mean? Susan looked at the 400-page proposal on the conference table. She smiled faintly. "Mr. Tanaka is a practitioner of the tea ceremony and a published poet of haiku," she said. He believes that the greatest truths are revealed not through overwhelming force, but through simplicity and quiet contemplation. This document, she gestured to the massive binder, is to his aesthetic an act of aggression. It's clumsy. She walked over to the window, looking down at the city below. Then she switched to a perfect formal Japanese, her tone imbued with a sense of reverence and calm. You should not approach him with a mountain of data. You should approach him with a single perfect stone, a summary that honors tradition while illuminating the future. The essence of the deal in 3 clear points. The rest is just noise. Edward stopped pacing and simply listened, marveling at the effortless shift in her language and demeanor. The memory of his mocking laughter in the restaurant surfaced, as it often did, a constant, humbling reminder of his own blindness. He had thought he was the master of his universe that night, a king in his court. He had been a fool blind to the queen who was standing right in front of him, patiently waiting to clear his table. She hadn't just saved his company or redefined his legacy. She had given him a new compass, one that pointed not just to profit, but to purpose. And for that, he knew he would forever be in her debt. A single sentence can change a life or save an empire. Susan Thompson's story is a powerful reminder that true worth isn't defined by a uniform, and intelligence isn't confined to a boardroom. It proves that the person you dismiss today might be the one person you desperately need tomorrow. The world is full of brilliant minds and resilient hearts in the most unexpected places, waiting not for a handout, but for a chance to be heard. What hidden talents and untold stories are you walking past every single day? If this story of courage and redemption moved you, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to the channel for more tales of hidden heroes and unexpected turns of fate. Let us know in the comments what you think of Susan's incredible journey.